This is Mark Galis. It's 9:31 a.m. on February 20th, 2025, and I'm calling the Concord Transportation Advisory Committee meeting to order. The meeting is being recorded, and the video recording will probably be posted later. So I'll start with a roll call. I'll start with our newest member, Rebecca. Rebecca?
Here, present.
Present. Nick Pappas?
Here.
Phil Posner?
Here.
Dan Schrager?
Here.
Okay, and I don't see, Ellen said she would be coming, but she's running a little bit late. And Phil said he may need to drop off for a few minutes. But I think we'll still have the quorum minimum of 4 with Rebecca, Nick, Dan, and myself. So we don't have minutes to approve. Mariana said she would get the minutes for the January 30th meeting together by next meeting. I'm not sure who's up to do minutes for this meeting. It might be Nick. Last time Mariana and Ellen swapped. Oh, here's Mariana in person. Great. So Mariana present. Mariana is present too. Okay, this is great. Nick or Phil, would one of you do the minutes for today? You're muted, Nick. Is that a yes?
Yes, I'll do them.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so chair's report. Couple of things. One thing is that Rebecca had pointed out to me that the Climate Action Committee is currently in the process of revising their action plan document. And it has a section on transportation, so it might be good to collaborate on some things, or at least see what each other is doing. So I sent a message to Brad Hubbard Nelson, and I'll be talking to him about how to collaborate going forward. One option is to have joint meeting. I'm not sure if joint meetings are always the best way to get anything done, because you've got so many people who want to take turns to talk, etc. But that's one option. Another option would be for each committee to consider the latest policy or action documents of the other committee as part of their meeting, and then kind of come up with something a little more specific to possibly discuss at a joint meeting. So I'll talk to Brad and see what he thinks. Rebecca, did you want to make a quick comment on that?
Very quick. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. I just wanted to say that my understanding of that, Mark, is that they want to go through the previous document, as written, and really very specifically hear how those have been updated or not, or what the status is for each of those targets. So just to clarify, I don't think it's open discussion. My understanding from them, it's more really to collaborate with TAC to really understand very purposefully where we are in our climate targets.
Okay, so after this meeting, I will send a link to that existing Climate Action Committee document, which is the one that the Climate Action Committee wants to revise, and ask Heather to send that to everybody so people could look at the transportation section, and we could consider what to do going forward. And as I say, I'll reach out to Brad, see what we can do most effectively. So that's one thing. Another thing is Phil had included me back end of January in some communication related to review of the walk audit results for Alcott, and then there was previously Thoreau. I don't know if there was there a Willard walk audit, Phil?
It was sort of a survey, because the state staff person who would typically attend couldn't attend, but we did have a walk around with Sarah Ashebeer, one of the state staff people, the school principal, and a number of parents and neighbors. So
So there was some information gathered.
information was gathered and a summary is going to be prepared by Sarah Ashabier instead of the usual person. So I will forward that to the committee if you'd like when I get that. And I may actually have it in my mailbox because I was out of town last week. Still kept.
Okay, yeah, no rush, but if there is information on any of that, send
Yeah.
it to Heather to distribute. Without additional personal opinions or comments, but just as documents.
Yeah.
And I will reach out to Sarah Ashabier, the outreach coordinator for Mass Safe Routes to School, about having her, seeing if she can come to a one of the subsequent PAC meetings. And I would also like to make sure that it's a meeting that Phil could be present at, because he's been the most involved PAC member, most knowledgeable about this. I think it'd be much more productive if he's there. So I'll reach out to Sarah and communicate with Phil about availability. The only other thing I wanted to mention is I did ask Heather to send out a notice that Brad Hubbard Nelson had brought to my attention, and Rebecca had brought to my attention, that on March 3rd, the MCAN has got an MBTA Zoom meeting set up to talk about MBTA and climate, which I think is very important. And one of the presenters is a woman that is in charge of new initiatives at MBTA that Ellen and I heard speak in Lexington, and she's really somebody important to listen to. I think MBTA is subject to the limitations of state funding sources. MBTA is really stepping up all over to improve transportation. So that is completes the chair's report. So the next item on the agenda is talk a little bit about the February 12th Public Works Commission meeting, talking about road, sidewalk safety, asset management, investment strategy. And Rebecca was attending online there, I believe, and Nick and myself. So we didn't have a TAC quorum. So in terms of minutes for that meeting, we don't need to make minutes. We'll just, I'll ask Heather to put a note that there was no quorum present. I'm going to just mention a few things that I think are important, and then kind of open it up for more questions and discussions. So and I've gotten some more recent information. So the overall plan putting forward by Public Works Commission, Public Works Department, is to ask town meeting to approve a $27.5 million bonding article. And the details are still being worked out between the finance director of Concord, town manager, Public Works, and it'll have to be reviewed next week by the town council, et cetera. So things are still in a bit of flux, but the basic idea is 25 million would be for finally bringing the road pavement management budget up to a level where the conditions and operations and safety of the surface of the roads is improved, and the ongoing maintenance costs will be significantly reduced to keep it that way. I'll pull up a couple of charts that kind of were presented at that meeting that relate to that. So the other 2.5 million of the borrowing to make up the 27.5 is for safety improvements, including sidewalks, crosswalks, other types of provisions for safety. And the idea is that in the past, there has been no real dedicated safety budget it was kind of a line item that got eaten into over and over again because the roads funding was not adequate to avoid major emergency repairs for which money was transferred out of things that were hopefully going to be used for safety improvements to make emergency repairs to roads and culverts and various types of infrastructure there. So basically that's kind of what we're talking about. And I believe one of tax roles is to advocate with the public to actually approve this bonding because it's going to have major positive impact for all kinds of modes of transportation in town. And because this money is, town's borrowing with its good credit rating, it's not dependent on the availability of Chapter 90 funding or other types of state or federal funding that may be drying up right now, given the political leadership at the federal level. So this money would be guaranteed to be available and spent as quickly as the town can identify projects and priorities, which in the next item, I'll talk a little bit about kind of update about how Stantec is helping the town prioritize things. So I just want to pull up, if I might, a couple of charts and then ask people if they have questions. So Stantec, in support of this borrowing article, did analysis of the pavement. Let me just pull this up and then kind of share my screen. Let's see this screen. Okay, good, we're sharing. Okay, that's not part of our transportation infrastructure, but okay. So I think this should be that. And it's not very complicated, so let's go there, let's increase it a little bit. So the background between the, some of the factors in the pavement management equation and economics are that, number one, if the pavement is in good condition, it's easy to keep it in good condition. Once it starts to fall down to this pavement condition index region of 50s, 60s, low 70s, the maintenance becomes much more expensive. And if you don't do that maintenance, you get into cases where you have to rebuild the entire road. And yesterday at the chair's breakfast, Sven Weber, the chair of the Public Works Commission, I think presented the argument very simply, which is that 40% of our roadways are in a condition of kind of falling off the edge of this financial cliff. And if we don't do something about it, we just do business as usual, a $20 million repair backlog is going to, over 5 years, become a $40 million backlog.
That's 40% under 70.
I think it's in the sort of the intermediate range. I mean, that I don't have that number exact, but there's some histograms that were generated. Not sure if they're in this particular document or not, but this was presented at the and Steve Dukron spoke to it. Let's go back down. So this is a chart that Stantec put together saying, that, and I asked them to put into in there, the red line that goes up, which is if we do what we've been doing for decades, which is just take $2.5 million a year out of the regular town budget. If we do that, the backlog of needed repairs is going to go from the $20 million up to the approximately, $38 million level over 5 years. And that is something that, impacts road conditions for everybody, but also it's kind of kicking this financial problem down the road. So what Stantec has done is taken under their second contract, the more engineering related one, they're using various tools for pavement management, looking at all the roads in Concord and condition. They did some evaluation of all of that current condition, and depending how much money you want to spend, how quickly, you can get a variety of improved results where you are lowering the backlog, which will mean that future maintenance would be cheaper, would be under $2.5 million. And depending how you do this, you can improve the pavement condition index, which is going to deteriorate rapidly if we don't spend more money on the roads. That's the red curve. And then there's a kind of a choice. There's a lot of parameters, but one way it's been sort of looked at is in various spreadsheets and things is what condition index are you aiming for, and how quickly can you spend how much money? I mean, the best green case is spend $7.5 million a year for 3 years, and get up to a very high level of quality of the roads and a very low level of needed ongoing maintenance. I think $1.5 million a year or something less than we do now. But the Public Works Department probably does not have the staff and the capability, even if that money was available, to spend the money that fast on improvements. So these are kind of the lower level issues. But again, I talked to Alan Cathcart, Director of Public Works, and he said that right now the general plan is this, to ask for $27.5 million bonding, of which $25 million is dedicated to the pavement maintenance and road repair, and to be spent, at one rate or another, say over the next 3 to 5 years. And then there's actually, for the first time, dedicated $2.5 million geared towards safety improvements, which is not dependent on the availability of grants, which is a big uncertainty.
Did you say which of these lines would be that?
Which one?
Of the
Well,
$7.5 million over 3 years?
well, $7.5 million over 3 years comes out to less than the 25 million. So again, there are a lot of, this is one of those things where maybe when Stantec prepares its report, they can come to TAC if there's still time on their, money on their contract available to have someone come here, or staff can help us, engineering staff, Steve Ducron, et cetera, can go over with us.
Yeah, because I think it'd be really great to present, this, it's kind of ironic that the idea that would double in 10 years is exactly what our tax rate is gonna do. So it's like one of those, I don't know, physics principles, but it's sort of, it would be really nice to present to the town that if we spend now, we're gonna avoid, the problems of bad roads, but also avoid a huge burden in the future. And that ironically, the Public Works doesn't have the staff to do the most aggressive line. I think those things would
Right,
just
there are
really
these,
need to be
practical
communicated,
constraints and things, and so it makes sort of a complicated
Yeah.
story, and the finance director, of course, is going to, as this solidifies, calculate what tax impacts would be
Yeah.
for the payback of the loan and the debt service and all that. One of the things behind this that I've heard multiple times from the Director of Public Works, Alan Cathcart, and other people is that, all of this is, been motivated by the finance committee, asking really for the town to do, 5-10 year planning rather than year to year. And that this is very helpful in terms of, also planning improvements and getting contracts set up, of actually knowing that there is money available there rather than having to go back every year to town meeting and incurring sometimes another year delay. We also are in an uncertain time in terms of grants. So I think that this is, more realistic. Of course, the town could ask for more money, but and do things faster or have more safety improvement money. And this is something that, the question is, what will the public vote for? So I think tax roll, I believe, is the kind of, or could be, it's up to tech. I'm just saying myself, I think that one of the things we could possibly do is say, really help explain this, try to understand it better, explain this to the public better, get, hear from the public what questions or concerns they have about this plan, and basically, assist. It isn't tax article, we're an advisory committee, but I think it's important. Another part of the presentation talked about sidewalks, and the news is that the sidewalks, the Stantec evaluated the sidewalks in town, some directly, others kind of indirectly, gathered a kind of a consensus on it. And it turns out there's a lot of backlog for sidewalks too, existing sidewalks. And even if all of the $2.5 million for safety went to sidewalks, it would not really make up for bringing all the existing sidewalks up to a very good condition, let alone putting any new sidewalks. So there's a lot of things that this does not yet provide, and it's a question of money. It's a question of funding. So
do we know what the cost of borrowing, bonding issue like this adds to the actual cost or no?
I don't know. These are good questions. And I mean, if we want to come up with a list of questions, there's these will pass on to staff. The article itself is being finalized right now. There's a deadline tomorrow, but then it needs to be further reviewed by town council and the town moderator. And I'm not sure myself how flexible the amounts are. Often things are voted this amount or any other amount. And I believe that when it comes to amendments from the floor, you can vote to lower the amount, but you cannot vote to raise them. You cannot modify the motion to raise the amount. However, I'm not sure. Somebody told me that if it's the town proposing it, they might have a plus or minus 10% wiggle room to just adjust it. But again, it's kind of really up to the public, including us, about do we want to spend more money and how we spend it, and try to make that case. But it's I don't know how people feel, but to me, it's both very simple and very complicated because of the constraints and this question about what is it really going to cost taxpayers going forward. But
do you know if the current projection of doubling the tax rate over 10 years, 7% increase that FinCon has talked about publicly includes this, or is this a request that FinCon's made, if you know, to committees to say, please plan out 5 to 10 years so we can have a better projection?
I know that they've asked to plan longer, and part of that, by the way, was due to the fact that Phil and I went to the FinCom a while back and said, we gotta looking at these things coming down the road. And, one piece of the finances is that right now we're spending $2.5 million a year on roads. And a certain amount that was supposed to be for safety getting pulled into emergency repairs. And probably some of that 2.5 million. So that money, this is a question that Terry Ackerman, our liaison, asked at the last Wednesday's meeting and got clarified. That this does not include the 2.5 million that we're currently spending out of general funds or whatever capital budget. And forgive me, I'm not the finance guy. So if I get the term wrong, double check with somebody who knows, but that 2.5 million goes back for other things. So whatever the repayment and debt service is, would be in some sense budget wise minus the 2.5 million, because this takes the place in a better way, more effective way of the 2.5 million. So I'm not sure how all that works out.
Well,
And that 2.5 million probably goes immediately somewhere else where it's
a fair
direct.
percentage of that 2.5 million would be going to the debt service, I would imagine.
I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah, what is the debt service?
What is the debt service?
in a simplistic.
So do we agree that we would like to ask, I mean, already, Mr. Ansaldi, the finance director has said, yes, as soon as things are finalized, he will generate these numbers, but I can pass on that we definitely want to, as potential actors to support this in the town, we want to know what the financial impact is.
Yeah. I mean, if the 25 million is sufficient to bring everything up to a PCI, that's gonna be. That's gonna lower our costs substantially going forward, then, let's borrow as much as we can, or issue a bond for as much as we can.
I think to know what the cost of the bonding would be, like, I don't have any idea what a current bond rate would, or current
Yeah,
cost of capital would be.
Yeah.
But I think also the question that the public is wanting to know is, what does this do to my taxes?
right.
And so translating into your tax rate, because that is the hot button today, I think.
Right,
Yeah,
and
same
so,
as in
and
the
so
Salem tax rate.
by the way, let me correct something else that I maybe misleading people or forgot to say. Again, take this with a grain of salt, because we gotta, until you hear it from the town manager or the finance director, don't take it as a final word. But the town meeting would authorize this 27.5 million. And then as there is a need to spend money, the town would then borrow the amount that they need to spend then. So it isn't like we're borrowing 25 million or 27.5 million and putting it in the bank and paying interest on it at the same time. It's the authorization, so that gives staff a lot more flexibility in terms of saying, we can actually spend 3.5 million this year and get some things done, or this year we can only spend 2 million, but they have the authorization to borrow it, and it's separate from looking for grants or the rest of the budget. To me, it seems like a very new thing. I mean, we borrow for schools and other buildings, long-term assets, but the roads are a
They're a long-term asset.
long-term asset, but we haven't ever used this for that.
I mean, I
For
think
transportation infrastructure.
I kind of remember FinCom presenting some sort of chart that was, as the all the different schools came on board, what the impact would be on the tax rate.
Yeah.
Something like that would be
Yeah,
really nice.
Yeah.
But I also would love if Alan could present an overlay, which is, because this is real too, it's our set of it is the cost
Yeah.
of town staff. What is the max he can spend a year? Because I mean, it could be, we could bring it down, but Alan would say, sorry, we only can do this level with the FTE.
You can't rip up 30% of the roads in town in 1 year.
Yeah,
Well, that's another.
it's equipment, maybe it's equipment and staff, but I think that combination of what would we borrow per year, and what would that potential impact on the tax rate be? But also, from Alan's point of view, what are the constraints in terms of staff and
Yeah.
equipment?
Okay, yeah,
think
so
that
we
would be
need
really
more,
useful.
we need more detail.
Yeah.
on Staff, and again, this is all kind of just like the, what Stanford did with the pavement maintenance using certain standard tools. This is all kind of modeling of different scenarios. And, when I don't know about you guys, but when it comes to the public, the idea of putting up a spreadsheet with like 100 lines on it is not going to be very useful. So we got to make sure the questions we ask get to the things like you were saying,
Yeah.
that chart about the school borrowings or something like
Because I
that.
think the FinCom does a great job in presenting the data to the public.
I think they're waiting, they're waiting and Carolyn Reed, who's on FinCom, had said to us last August, her advice was vis-a-vis FinCom, TAC reaching out to FinCom, as soon as you know how much money you want to, and when, come to us. So I think staff will be doing that, but I think to the extent that TAC members can also follow this and be present, go to the appropriate
Oh, yeah.
Public Works Commission meeting or FinCom, the more we can be like surrogates for the wider public and listening to the wider public and trying to clarify these things, because I think sometimes in the past, it's been a big challenge for staff, I'll put it that way, to explain financial requests to the public and justify them. Because once you go just 1 or 2 levels down, it gets so complicated.
Because I think the public wants to know, what does it do to my taxes?
Absolutely,
That's the
yes.
bottom line.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
It's really
And-
the bottom line.
And if it reduces it further down the road, that's one thing, but if it kicks it up too much right now, and this might also influence the rate of spending and the trade-off with long-term
maybe-
benefit versus
Maybe
short-term.
it's I'm sorry,
cost.
not to belabor it,
Yeah.
but maybe it's 2 things. One, independent of everything else, how would this affect the tax rate? But then FinCom always had this layered thing of like, okay, the high school comes in, then the middle school, then the
Yeah.
safety building. It would be good then to put it as an overlay of the overall tax rate.
Yeah,
So just so people don't say,
Which
well,
is-
forget this, we don't want our tax.
Yeah, the problem is as things drop off, you don't see a commensurate reduction in the tax rate either. That's,
Yeah.
things
things always seem to go up.
things don't go down. So I wanna, we'll go around table. So Mariana, do you have any comments, questions? Urgent, like we better do this?
Yeah, I think, nothing groundbreaking. I think it's a lot of road maintenance that, Dan just said we can't do it all
Mhm.
all at once. So
No, you
Yeah.
can't shut down the town. So you're
Yeah.
gonna have nice
everyone,
roads when you come,
stay home
everyone
for
go
a
on
few days.
vacation.
Yeah.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how this is received. Like Ellen said, everyone wants to know what it means for each household.
Yeah, and there will be hearings, but I would encourage TAC members to think about. When we start, it's great to be asking these questions, but is there anything we can do to involve the public more? Because I've heard multiple times from staff all the way to the top that the system that says you have 5 minutes to present a very complicated case to the public is not sufficient to
Right.
really address things. So I even said to Sven, the chair of the Public Works Commission, I don't see any reason why somebody couldn't put together a 15-minute video that was carefully edited that
Oh,
explained things and put it online, or, yeah, or whatever. I mean, why,
Mhm.
if something's complicated, there's ways to explain it and then you can kind of workshop it and improve it. So,
Like a full
depends how
page
much.
ad in the paper.
Yeah, like scare people. I'm moving out
All
of
the
Concord.
Jersey
Anyway, online, Rebecca, did you want to add some questions or comments to this particular discussion?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I guess I would share with people who weren't at the meeting that I did ask how climate has been incorporated into the modeling. And it to me, on one hand, it's really wonderful to see them do more longer term planning. And it must be so frustrating for them to be in a situation where they're always having to respond to things. But I do see it as a bit of a missed opportunity that their answer was that climate has not been incorporated. We've already had 1.5 warming year. We know that the climate escalation is going to start going really quickly. So to me, anything long-term, it's an opportunity to really think about the kind of climate changes that we need to make, including helping people get out of their cars. And something that's just such a big road investment could have also been a real investment in the kind of future we need to see to make those a priority. And I know that the safety changes and also mobility options a priority. So the fact that the safety is there, if that passes, is encouraging. But just to be very honest, to me, I was a bit disappointed that they didn't include climate from the outset.
Well, this is probably something that I can try to bring back to Public Works. They're struggling with more than one issue. One of them is something that is even in worse shape, I might opine, than the roads, which are visible, is the stormwater infrastructure under the roads everywhere. And there have been cases of bridge failure, another almost bridge concern shutdown, culverts, emergency repairs at a great deal of, at least 2x or more what it would cost if you did it in timely preemptive fashion, if you will. So when you're talking about climate, are you more talking about resilience to climate change coming, or more about efforts to try to reduce carbon emissions?
To me, the both are very important and very relevant. So for example, when they talked about the stormwater option, that is, that's good that they're thinking about that. I'm new here, so I'm still learning.
Okay,
So
sure.
it was a little it was a little confusing to me. It sounded like that would be more something that they would ask of the residents rather than something built into the town investments. So to me, being brand new, and I totally acknowledge that I'm here and I'm learning, there's a question for me about priorities. So these things, yeah, the stormwater investment is good, and that helps, with adaptation. But the mitigation is also really important too. And we know that the mobility options to help people get out of the car. One, that's part of our pledge as the town that we made with the Sustainable Concord document, that we were going to do that. And two, because of the warming that has already happened, we know that those climate impacts are going to come very quickly. So I would say they're both very important, adaptation and mitigation.
Right, okay. Phil, is Phil with us, or did he drop off? Oh, I see a phone number. That's probably Phil. Phil, if you wanted to add anything to the discussion, go ahead. Okay, you can always interrupt later. We can go back. So I want to move on to the next thing on the agenda. And oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just
Ellen, sure.
Rebecca, so thanks for your comments, but because I totally love them. I think we should all keep in mind that one of the things that's we've talked a lot about is mass transit, public transit, and the cost of potentially having to subsidize that over the first couple of years. So I have in the back of my head is we have not even brought up to the town the opportunity to mitigate getting people out of cars through public transit.
Absolutely.
So it's in my head.
Yeah, no, that's very important, and the question of how to get that started, how to fund it.
Yeah.
I mean, I even had a crazy idea this morning that we have two train stations, and just a minute. Heather, you were.
Yeah, I just wanted to interrupt to say that when calling from a phone, you do *6 to mute and unmute yourself. So just in case that's an issue.
Okay, thank you. And I also didn't ask Nick if he wanted to comment. Nick, why don't
Heather,
you?
thank you for,
Oh,
can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you, Phil. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Heather. I
*6,
appreciate that.
*6.
So, just for the record, I'm now on a mobile phone, and that's what my telephone number is, the icon that's coming up on the screen.
Right.
So I do have a question. In connection with the meeting with the Public Works Commission, was there any discussion of public outreach prior to the town meeting with respect to the warrant article? Did they have a tactics or a strategy to sell this in a manner that might be at least along the same lines as the school building, the middle school building committee? Because member of the school building committee for a year was out there promoting the idea of doing the school in the fashion that it was eventually programmed. So I'm just wondering whether that was part of the conversation. And thanks again, Heather.
Thanks, Phil. So, Rebecca and Nick can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall, I mean, I know that that is something everybody is aware of. I talked to Alan Cathcart and to Sven Weber after the meeting. I think Sven is probably going to be the person who would present, I'm not sure, but I believe he's be the person that would present with Alan and Steve Dukron and you know, finance director, et cetera, giving technical support as needed, say for a finance committee presentation or whatever. But I kind of take the point behind your question that we really need a better way, a more forceful way of communicating this need to the public, or it's just going to strike them completely as a gigantic ask without enough justification. So I think that is a work in progress, and I think TAC has to help out. And again, when you have the experts who are responsible for the finance or the engineering and the planning, it seems to me they don't want to step out of certain lines of responsibility. And sometimes in order to advocate to the public, you need to kind of give a simple picture that then has more details, but the experts are sometimes hesitant. It's like you ask a lawyer or a doctor and they'll say it depends, or if you need more tests. So that's a good question, Phil. I think that's really to the point. Nick, did you want to comment or ask a question?
Well, just, yeah, in response to Rebecca's comment about climate action, I think that I don't see the Public Works has any obvious charter to do much the way it's currently constituted, beyond what they're doing with stormwater. And I think it's more on us to work with the Climate Action Committee to get support for public transit and other initiatives that would get people out of cars.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, so I'll move on to the next item, which actually might be relatively short, because so at the previous regular TAC meeting on January 30th, I kind of sprung out of the check in the box idea of TAC possibly recommending some locations in Concord where a little bit of high level concept creation for safety improvements and functional improvements for all modes of transportation could be useful. And the thought I had, just personally, this is not, as I clarified to Rebecca, she asked me, we talked yesterday about it. This wasn't something that TAC had voted or decided. So this is just something to consider the pros and cons on. So where this came from was, first of all, having heard multiple times over multiple years and hearing that the traffic management group and town staff has heard multiple times over multiple years about safety problems at particular locations that involve infrastructure that's either absent or not really well laid out. So like the Kenny Dunn Square in West Concord is a case where there's sidewalk on one side, there's places people want to get on the other side, and it's close to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and there are cyclists trying to get over to the rail trail, and people have to go way out of their way to actually find a crosswalk. And the traffic itself, just for motorists, is confusing. So it looks like, oh, a problem, but a problem's an opportunity. Similarly, a couple of years back, I think TAC did a site visit at the public library crossing of Sudbury Road by is it Stowe Street? I think it's Stowe Street.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that's a very magically dangerous crossing. We got a letter from someone working at the library that constantly people come in and say, I almost got run over on my way to the library.
Huh.
So it needs some it needs to go to the doctor. It needs some professional diagnosis. And, my thought in sort of throwing this out, and I'm not sure it's really the best idea going forward, but, at least in that form, would be that, it could help public engagement with realizing the importance of having some actual allocated money for safety improvements. That there are these places where laser focus and professional funding for professional analysis and construction could maybe make a difference, right? However, I've heard back from town engineer and director of public works that Stantec is proceeding rapidly and is looking at all of the public input from the previous first Stantec contract, public outreach and survey, et cetera, and adding in some other things about the usage levels at particular places and stuff to come up with a prioritization of projects and things. So that suggests to me that maybe TAC does not need to provide its own list, but nonetheless, we can kind of gather locations where we think there is strong public need and input and kind of compare those later against what Stantec comes up with. And also use this as a way to make things real for the public, because if you know, there's never enough money, but if the public says, we're just going to spread this little by little over the whole town, that's not necessarily the way to do it. If you talk about, well, I'll just, before I let other people speak, I'll just say one other thing that comes to my mind about it is many times when I've observed that many times when a member of the public talks about safety problems somewhere, they also propose an intervention of something. We need a stop sign here. We need a sidewalk or a crosswalk or something, or some different signage or something. And I think that's kind of skipping steps because all these changes interact, and they might make it better for one mode of transport or one set of people and worse for another. Certain things can be done with less money, but maybe they are kind of a Band-Aid and they really just kick the real problem down the road. You know, given that we don't have endless amounts of money, I think it's important to give the public a sense of sort of scope and a reality check. I had mentioned to Rebecca, if I mentioned that one of the things we had talked about 6 or 8 months ago was, I forget what word we used. I was saying case study, but some kind of whatever. And Rebecca can, I want her to speak directly about it, but that she feels that told me she felt that public might not really want to spend money for a case study. It doesn't sound like action oriented, whatever. Rebecca, do you want to speak? Me not put words in your mouth.
No, I appreciate your depiction of it, Mark. Yeah, my comment about that, or my question about it, was just that because the priority has been on roads and fixes for the roads, because the road situation has been deprived, right? So then even the fixes get pushed off. So just like we talk about backlog of road work, there's a backlog of safety and mobility investments. So at this point, the desperation, that's a strong word, but there's a very strong, let me put it a positive way. There's a very strong interest from a lot of people, as has come up in the public forums, et cetera, to see progress, especially given the urgency of the times we're in. So yes, I cautioned on case study.
Yeah. And so, but again, this is sort of a balancing point here that, you know, how specific can you get for how much money, and how do you involve the public in a meaningful way? Because it's very easy for 10 members of the public all to agree we need to do something, but they won't necessarily agree on what to do and what is effective. So, Lisa,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
please.
No, I'm just still getting up to speed here and just, it's really interesting to hear, this new project and all the, all the work that you've already been doing. And I was just curious, is there, like a transportation plan that you previously worked on that had a, like a bicycle pedestrian transit focus? Kind of like a bicycle and pedestrian plan or anything like that that's previously been completed for the town that can be drawn on, or I'm just curious on what other,
Well, there is there's a Envision Concord 2030 long-range plan that, every
Okay.
community has to generate one of those every so often. And it has, I think if I remember right, I checked this when I was presenting tax vision on transportation to the Economic Vitality Committee. I believe that Envision Concord is 274 pages long, and if you search for the word transportation, it occurs 274 times. Now, granted, a lot of them are entitled,
Yeah.
sections,
Right.
things like that. But it really, we've had a lot of verbiage and a lot of documents, but we don't have enough action. Rebecca, did you want to make a
Yeah,
comment?
just quickly, thanks. What about the Sustainable Concord document that has mobility section? It's the one that the Climate Action Committee is trying to draw attention to see what progress we've made. And in that, I don't know if you've seen that yet. I can try to help you get a link, but it's really helpfully delineated of what the target is and the sub-steps needed to get to that target. So in my mind, it's a very user-friendly document for guidance of the town's vision.
Right.
I don't recall that it has specific infrastructure recommendations. It just says we should have, in very general terms, that we should support bicycles and other carbon-friendly modes of transportation. I think I'm assuming what Elise is looking for is something that's more specific in terms of a plan with laying out specific improvements that we would do. We have nothing like that. Nothing.
yeah, I guess that's just something I'm thinking just from my experience in other communities. They, typically have, some kind of a plan that sort of has, they has goals, but then actually has like a list of action items and targets for, bicycle, pedestrian, transit infrastructure. And I guess just like what I'm, seeing is that you don't have something like that. So that might be something to explore, in the next year or two,
Right.
just something like that could help you kind of focus your energies, and funding towards something like that. So,
Well, the couple of things. So when I was doing the chair's report, I referred to the fact that Rebecca had mentioned possible tech reaching out to the Climate Action Committee, and so I will definitely ask Heather to send out a link to that document that Rebecca is referring to, which, as Nick says, has kind of general high level actions, but
Sure.
it has no geography in it. It has no infrastructure. TAC has created a 2-page transportation mobility document. TAC is sort of TAC is an advisory committee, right, to the town manager and select board. And one of the things that I think we did in generating both a general document about transportation needs and action goals and actions, and also another document related to doing discovery and research about how we could possibly implement some forms of public transportation. Those are, I think, between just total vision documents and advisory documents, because the way I saw them is they are a tool that staff can use as resources are allocated and made available, financial or staff-wise, to say, we're going to work on this item, which is in the TAC or possibly the Climate Action Committee's document. But where the rubber hits the road in terms of actual projects, we don't have enough staff I mean, we're not the city of Cambridge. I don't know how many people work in the transportation department of the city of Cambridge or even the city of Lexington. Staff is busy maintaining what we already have. And they're falling behind, not because of lack of effort, but because of lack of funding for that. So the result is we have to contract that out. So the Stantec second study is in a way the first effort to actually accomplish this, because the first Stantec contract, I think, was basically reaffirming what we already knew, which is valuable, but it didn't add that much more specificity to general goals of the Vision Concord. So I think this is where we have a gap. And so I refer you, Alyssa, again to those two documents, which should be posted somehow on the
We
new
just
thing.
shared you an email that Elizabeth sent around
So-
last.
Yeah.
So it's just to bring it to the top of your inbox, because I'm sure Elisa.
Oh,
will
thank
have
you so
gotten
much,
that.
Miriam.
But it's the documents that were shared with Stantec as part of the RFP, and it's a pretty good
Okay.
list with links.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I mean, we're trying, I think we're trying as volunteers to do what we can to enable staff by means of, staff is not in the policy-making position. It's boards, select board, et cetera. And if we can't decide on priorities, how is staff going to say we should do this with our limited resources versus that?
Oh, for sure. And I guess what I was just saying is that, other communities that I've worked in have, a planning document that does do that prioritization. So then staff can look at that for guidance and how, to
Well,
prioritize.
It wouldn't hurt for us to look at what other communities have done.
Yeah, I'm
with
not
various
saying
levels
to
of
do it
resources.
right now, but I'm just
No,
saying
no,
it's
no,
something to
it's-
think about, and
Yeah, I
as you're
appreciate it.
trying to kind of, kind of like, have a more holistic,
Mhm.
view of your work and how it can focus staff effort and,
Mhm.
in projects, so,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I think that maybe Rebecca, I'm sorry, Rebecca,
Oh, Rebecca?
Go ahead, Ellen.
thinking that one of the things, if we had a prioritization list of specific activities,
Mhm.
and maybe they shouldn't be called case studies so much as opportunities, and make it kind of not just a specific place, but what is somebody trying to do? They're trying to get to the library, they're trying to get to the hospital, but that includes some metrics. So Janet Miller, Rebecca forwarded me something on e-bikes, and it was a carbon calculator on e-bike adoption, but you could do the same logic for any kind of bicycle, for for public transit. And then, I don't know how you do it, but probably the other metric that'd be really good is some sort of metric, and maybe it's just subjective, high, medium, low, and safety. Because I think those two we know the numbers, we know the dollars, we know the bonding costs, but
Right,
some idea of the, mitigation impact.
right.
And then the safety, which I think is something the public really cares a great deal about, but
Oh,
I don't know how we measure it.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
that would be really something, we should just take a stab at it in some way.
Well, I think, and
They're good.
you've mentioned this before, Ellen, but yes, safety is very important. But I think one very useful thing included in what you've mentioned is this idea of where people are trying to go for what purpose. And
Right.
what would the metric be in terms
So-
of availability and
So
safety?
for example, that when we talked about Concord Public Library, that one of the suggestions was, Heather, I think you said this, extending it all the way to Main Street.
Mhm.
Which both ways of getting to the library,
Mhm.
to make it kind of holistically, I want to get to the library. Candy Down is a perfect example of a mess, there's lots of
Yeah, I
implications.
think I'm gonna ask other people to comment, but I don't wanna spend too much more time on this. People probably, but it's an important discussion. But I do think that going back to what I kind of said in the preamble to this item, Stantec is working on prioritization of projects, and it'll be very interesting to see what comes to the top of their
Yeah.
prioritization, compare it with some of these things that TAC is already and traffic management group has already experienced as um, priorities in terms of public ask and need and not trivial to resolve. Nick, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Elisa, I think it would be helpful if we could see an example of one or two of those plans from other towns, just so we know
Yes.
what the scope is.
Yeah, definitely. I know Bedford had a bicycle and pedestrian plan that was already completed, but I was helping them with some of the implementation
Mhm.
of that plan, so I can send that. And then of course Newton had one as well. I wasn't as involved with that one, but I can certainly send that as an example too.
That'd be great,
Yeah.
thank you.
So can I jump in
Yes.
here for a sec?
Please, Phil.
Has anybody asked Stantec to provide us with assistance with the specific task? Because that's what they do. This is within their wheelhouse.
Yes, that they
So
are
in other
doing
words,
that.
you're talking about implementation of the ideas, not just creating a priority list, right? So has anybody tasked Stantec with approaching us and approaching the staff and giving us recommendations about how to get from step 1 to step 2 to step 3?
Oh, I know that they've done an assessment of existing infrastructure and they've done modeling about the pavement and sidewalks improvement costs. And they are doing
So that's
overall.
all step 1 stuff. That's all that stuff is step 1 stuff, right? And then the setting of priorities is step 2, but the implementation is step 3. And implementation is what they assist people with too. So we have a budget for them. Maybe we can recommend that their tasks include helping our staff with implementation. And then presenting that to the public within the next 3 months, so that when the public has an opportunity to go to the town meeting, they will say yes. These things work together, right?
Well,
if you don't get the public.
No, I hear what you're saying, I think, Phil, and I appreciate it. But let me tell you what I know about the status, or at least what I'm observing, is that there are more steps than you're talking about. And fixing infrastructure that's broken or soon to be broken is one thing, because I haven't heard anybody say to save money, we should remove some streets or we should remove some sidewalks. So we have an existing transportation infrastructure that we're just about to fall off the cliff on maintenance. So that is a major townwide priority. But Stantec, in addition, is already well on the way of taking information from gathered in the first contract about overall needs and putting it into a matrix of priorities and usage levels and things like that to see what projects should be recommended. When I suggested at last meeting that TAC might put forward a small number, 3 or 4 of specific projects, it was exactly to answer the kind of question you're raising or follow the sort of suggestion you're raising of how would we actually implement the change at the library or at Kenneth Dunn Square, and at a high level, because we don't have enough money in the contract, as far as I know, to actually produce construction plans. And before we would
I never suggested a construction plan. I suggested a plan that would provide guidance to the staff as to how to get from one step to the other. Of course, there's not enough money for construction plans, but I think one of our biggest struggles is that we do a great job of talking about stuff in this town. We do a lousy job of implementing it as far as this kind of thing is concerned. And we have a consultant on board whose expertise includes helping towns get from one step to the next step, to the next step. Why don't we employ their expertise? I'm not asking for a finished, here's all the projects with construction plans. But I am asking for a methodology, and they have within their wheelhouse the methodology.
Okay,
And
I hear
I
what
guess
you're saying.
I guess my biggest gripe about this is if I'm sitting at the town meeting, I'm inclined to ask why $25 million should be raised as a debt authorization if the town isn't prepared to spend it. What are we going to do with it? When is it going to get done?
No, I think
These are questions that the taxpayers at the town meeting are going to be asking. If we can't come up with good answers, I think the taxpayers are going to say, come back with a better fleshed out plan.
I think
Okay.
that Alan Cathcart made clear at that meeting that they know the level that they can manage at, and that's why they've said that they could spend the $5 million a year, but not $7.5 million a year, because they just don't have the capabilities. They don't have the staff to manage that level of projects. So they are capable. They say they are capable, and that it's within the scope of what they have done historically.
Well, the scope of what they've done historically, not to be a sourpuss about this, has only included pavement improvements. It has not included safety improvements or sidewalk improvements. So I think that the town meeting members are going to be asking about that, and they're going to be asking, how are you going to implement that as well? What's your plan?
I don't
You're
think
talking
that,
specifically about the $2.5 million for safety improvements.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
okay, but I mean, Phil,
I'll just shut up now. So it's a
Okay,
little
all right.
difficult with the phone.
no, I think we're sort of circling back to one point, which is really important, which is vis-a-vis this borrowing ask. We need to justify it to the public, help justify to the public in terms of the actual delivered improvements. And I 100% agree with that. I would also point out that the town has done a lot of safety improvements. We just announced a long sidewalk from on Walden Street, that funding was found to put a sidewalk in a place where, otherwise you're walking on a country road in a very big connection to Route 2 and the high school and the emergency services and all that. There was a crossing of Sudbury Road that was used by a lot of kids going to school over in off towards Vero Farms in that area. A number of years ago, lights put in. There have been a lot of improvements, but staff has not had the time to kind of blow their own horn and promote what actually does get done. Instead, we haven't had the resources. So I think we're circling back to an agreement here that we need to tell the public why having the safety money on top of the maintenance money is really important. But there's a dilemma here about how can you be specific before you can be specific. And I'm not sure how we're going to resolve that, but Stantec has been tasked and is far along with a prioritization. And I think as soon as that comes to TAC, we're going to have to look at that and say, does this make sense to us or not, or is it clear? And it may take more separate funding to Stantec to fill things in. I would have to leave it completely up to staff to decide what help they need from Stantec in terms of being able to do their job. I mean, that's not for me to say. We're more in goals and things. So, Mariana, did you want to?
Yeah, I think there's also a second public meeting coming up in our Stantec scope at some point. I don't know if that's still, I know we got a little off of our schedule with them, but I think that'll help, once we get to a point, somewhere between like the schematic planning and the implementation phase, like you're talking about, Phil, is kind of, we can re-engage with the public and say, here's what we're talking about, and get a little more feedback at a much more concrete point in the project.
Okay,
It seems a lot easier to prioritize the 25 million for the PCI improvements than it is to prioritize the safety. I think that's what I'm getting from Phil is,
yeah, no, this is a very good conversation. I'm gonna take a public comment from Linda Neiman here.
Thank you, Linda Neiman, 59 Mallard Drive. I may be misunderstanding the process a little bit, but it sounds like there's a $25 million strictly for pavements, and there has its own prioritization, the PCI index, all of that.
Mhm.
And then-
Modeling
right.
of what you get for how you.
Right, and then there's an additional $2.5 million that's being asked for specifically safety and sidewalks, which is a stated goal for the climate action plan. The residents want it,
Mhm.
but it's been, you even said so yourself, it's not enough money to even get us up to the point of repairing what needs to be repaired. We have a huge backlog here. And I also am confused because originally when I heard the number, it was $5 million, and now it's $2.5 million for the safety and sidewalk improvements. And I know that there was some safety improvements that you had presented at the last TAC for different places, like the library and the Haywood Meadow intersection.
Yeah,
which-
that's just,
But that's left over from the Stantec contract we have right now, right? That's not going to be incorporated into the ask that we're going to be asking residents, right? So I guess, and in my opinion, like, if you want to prioritize safety, it can't be like separate asks every time, for, one-off items, but it should be like what Bedford does. And it should be a portion of the public works funding should be dedicated for safety and pedestrian and bicycle improvements, so that folks can get around town as part of a comprehensive plan. So that's my one concern. I might be misunderstanding, but it sounds like we have just like this token amount in sidewalks and safety. It's really not even going to get us a whole lot. And if I just a random resident going, I'm like, why would I spend this money? It doesn't sound like it's part of a comprehensive plan. The pavement or streets is a totally different ask. Do you know what I'm saying here?
yeah, well, let me clarify a couple things. First of all, the, there is no current conceptual plan or detailed plan or funding focused on any of the 4 things I mentioned as possibilities. I was just trying to say, these are needs been expressed by a lot of people over a number of years. And would it help the town engineer and director of public works in guiding the second Stantec's work on the second project to make it closer to what, like Phil was asking, actionable things, if tax suggested some things. But I've been told that Stantec is already doing a prioritization work based on all the previous input that the first Stantec study did, and other kinds of assessments of usage patterns and whatever. But given Concord's history, I would say that actually having $2.5 million earmarked specifically for the safety improvements and combining that, as the Public Works has said over and over again, strategically with road repair, because if a street needs to be repaired and it's on the priority list for repair, simultaneously taking care of curbs, sidewalks, crossings, and things like that at the same time is much more efficient than trying to patch it on. In fact, I think a lot of times you don't end up with a very good result. So yes, it's a small amount, but it's a small amount compared to a gigantic hole that we're trying to climb out of, that I don't see how we can avoid climbing out of the pavement business unless people are willing to give up roads and say, we don't want these roads anymore. I mean, it's existing infrastructure. Fortunately, I don't think people are asking for new roads, but we may hear that. But I mean, it's perfectly fine to advocate for, I mean, I have said, why are you not asking for 30 million? Why are you not asking for more? Town can always refuse it. People can always cut it down. I agree with you. It's not enough.
But I
But
feel
but
like
I'd rather take something than nothing.
a binary thing, like you either have to pick roads or pick safe intersection and sidewalk. Why can't it be both? Why can't we prioritize it so that, you know, the areas with high foot traffic in town around the schools get the most attention and
Mhm.
have the safest ways to get around town. And couple that with any road work that needs to be
I
done.
think that's what Stantec is trying to do. So I think that I mean, I don't know enough of the details to speak, and I'm not a civil engineer, but the money for the roads, obviously, when you redo a road, you may have to redo the curbs, you may widen, narrow, you have to put markings, etc., replace crosswalks, maybe make them ADA compliant or different things. So I think that, I mean, you're bringing up an important point is that I haven't really gotten, it's hard to pin people down when it's like everything depends on the particular case. How much safety improvement automatically comes out of the 25 million? That's called pavement management, or is it simply just pavement? And I think there are safety related things in there. But the more the public asks and says, we definitely want to borrow it. I mean, I wish we could. I mean, literally, I said, ask for 30.
Mhm.
It can always be knocked down. I mean, there isn't that much difference, but the difference in what you get is going to be significant. So, anyway, this is just my idea.
I just,
Go ahead.
Can I add?
Elizabeth.
yeah,
Sure, of course.
the only thing I wanted to add on that is that, sometimes also for, pedestrian bicycle improvements, you know, that set amount, that seems like that 2.5 million, right, that is part of that. There are improvements that the town can make that can be supplemented by grant monies as
Yes.
well, so. I mean, when you're looking at that, maybe just understand that there may be additional funding that's available. I know that CPW there was a grant that they received where they are constructing a sidewalk, and I think you probably on Walton.
Yeah.
That was completely funded by a grant, so it's not
Oh.
as if that
But
2.5
also,
million is the
if-
only
if-
amount that will ever be
If the town
spent.
says we'll pay 25% or 50%, can you pay the rest of it? Your likelihood
Right.
of getting a grant, it shows the seriousness
It
of the
does,
town
so to
and
have
the
that
need,
set aside for those,
how to leverage it.
yeah, you can leverage that to obtain more grant.
But it also sends the message, we only care about safety if we can get grants for it.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, this goes back to the tax burden. I mean, it's like, we build a lot of schools, we could have done safety instead of schools.
Yeah, it comes down to priority, say priority, but to make sure you have dedicated allocation of funds. It doesn't have to be a permanent, but like, if we don't have grant funding, but we're definitely going to make efforts towards it, because I feel like the town staff, they're not gonna spend time on it if they are unsure of whether or not they're gonna have funding for it.
Right.
Why?
Well, this is I see this as a start, it's an important start, but it's not finished, and the sidewalks, it's kind of was surprised to me that there's such a backlog with sidewalks.
It's not feasible to get grant support for the 25 million piece of this, is it? And just for
For
bringing.
25 million?
No, supporting,
Apparently it used to be, but the state has got very stingy.
Yeah, I think
The
that
state used to.
this
give
was
money
just
to
like
towns.
kind of, just an add-on. I don't know. I mean, this is just what's happened historically. It's a little harder to know what will happen with grant funding in the future. But, just wanted to provide that, that extra, from my experience.
All right. So I want to make sure there's time for any members of the public who are online who want to speak, and I'll ask Ms. Ackerman if she would like to make a comment.
No, your discussion is great. I love that you're working with the Public Works, and the finance questions you're asking are all going to be coming out at the hearings, and we will need tax advocacy at that time, and you can start as soon as you want, really. So great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Do any members of the public wish to make a comment? Betsy, would you like to make a comment? Go ahead, Betsy, unmute. I can't hear you.
Thank you. Sorry, I minimized my screen on accident. I have really appreciated the discussion. I think it's really informative and thoughtful. Just wanted to echo what Linda Neiman said. Oh, sorry, I'm 1741 Wedgewood Common is my address. And I just wanted to echo what she said about making sure we have a line item for safety. So I think we've already been basically saying that, but just making it very concrete going forward, that there's always something in the budget for the safety improvement. So, thanks.
Thank you, Betsy. Any other public comments? I see Adrian Peterson, Ned Perry. Pat Nelson, did you want to make any comment? She's the liaison from the planning board.
No.
Hi.
Thanks. I don't. Other than this certainly has been a good conversation. However, it just seems like I keep wanting to have just an elevator speech on what it is you're trying to accomplish at this moment in time, what the task at hand is to support the $25 million borrowing. And it's confusing to me. And if it's going to be confusing to me, it's going to be confusing to the public. So that's my only comment, to maybe try to narrow in your elevator speech, I guess. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is our challenge for us and staff and Public Works Commission. Okay, if there's no, Tanya,
Yeah, hi.
identify yourself.
Hi, Tanya Galis, 62 Prescott Road. Just I want to reiterate something I have said before, which is to differentiate between bicycle and pedestrian safety, at least at times, not to always put it in one basket. Also, as I'm watching this, I am amazed how much is being expected of the TAC when I believe, I may be wrong about this, okay? So even though I live with Mark, we don't always talk about every detail of everything. It seems to me like some of the budgeting and some of the presentation, this is like in the hands of Public Works, not really the tax domain. Am I wrong? I mean, you're having this very intense discussion about finances and what to ask for, what not to ask for, but I got the feeling that that was the Public Works and staff domain. So I'm sorry if I'm making an irrelevant comment here. Thank you.
Okay.
We can come up with the numbers.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that, and you know, not speaking for myself, I feel like TAC has to be involved to support the Public Works Department and the Public Works Commission in this ask, because it dovetails with transportation and with longer range planning, including planning for safety, which is one of TAC's main concerns. And you know, how are we gonna get money for public transit if we can't even get money to make the roads in good shape and sidewalks? I hear your comment about pedestrian. I think sometimes pedestrians are very they don't speak loudly, but there are a lot of us. There are a lot of a lot of people who walk at least one place or another. So thank you. Okay, if there's no more public comment, I will adjourn the meeting.